Down, I told somebody to grab the water hose. I tried to run water on him and call the ambulance. I'm like, before I could say I don't bang or something like that, or what's going on, man, what's happening? La, 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 la.
Bonds' life could have been a Hollywood script, minus the glitz and with a whole lot of grit. Growing up in South Central LA, he navigated tough streets, foster care, and the crack epidemic. From his breakout role in The Wood to stealing scenes in Lockdown and Dope, his talent stood out even when his life was in chaos. But just as he was rising in Hollywood, his world flipped. Gunshots, a tragic altercation, and years spent in prison became chapters in his story. His journey is as real as it gets, and he's far from done.
I grew up in like 80th and Avalon, on the east side, in the Swans. Everybody, probably know about that.
So Bonds grew up in South Central LA, bouncing around places like Avalon and the East Side salons. He spent time in Compton on Atlanta Drive and hit up schools like 52nd Street Elementary and John Muir Middle. Basically, he covered a lot of ground. Watts, Inglewood, you name it. His early life wasn't exactly a fairy tale, though. DeAndre's dad wasn't really in the picture much. They had their moments, sure, but their bond wasn't as strong as he'd have liked. Sadly, his dad passed away in 2005, and by then, their relationship was more of a missed connection. Still, DeAndre holds on to the good bits they did share.
He passed away in 2005, and the last time I saw him was 2001, probably,
okay.
Yeah, in
So,
court.
In court.
Now his mom, total warrior. She raised him and his 7 siblings while navigating her own challenges. She had 8 kids with 6 men. Back in the day, life threw some heavy punches. Think the crack epidemic, tough streets, and all the chaos that came with it. DeAndre's mom struggled, but eventually turned it all around. She's been clean and thriving for over 3 decades now. Growing up, DeAndre had to step up early. With no dads around for him and his siblings, he became the man of the house way before he was ready. We're talking pumping gas, selling candy, hustling to make sure there was food on the table. That's a big load for a kid.
However, we had one another, and that made us a stronger unit. You know what I mean? That's all we needed was one another, and our mother was our rock.
Things hit rock bottom when they ended up in foster care. His mom made the tough choice to check into rehab, determined to turn things around and get her kids back. And she did. Took her a couple of years, but she pulled it off. As for foster care, it was a mixed bag. Some homes were all right, with caretakers who genuinely tried to help, but DeAndre wasn't about that life and ended up at a youth center with 40 other boys. Imagine a house full of teenage energy, all carrying their own baggage. Fights broke out, of course, but over time they built some camaraderie. There were field trips and moments of connection, little wins amidst the chaos. So DeAndre got shot 3 times. Yep, 3. All in one go because he happened to be in the wrong spot at the wrong time.
I was at the wrong place at the wrong time. I had on the wrong colors.
No way!
Yeah.
He said he was wearing the wrong colors when it all went down. Someone pulled up, chased him, and before he could even explain himself, shots started flying. DeAndre remembered everything slowing down like some kind of slow-motion scene. He didn't even realize he was hit at first.
Before I could say I don't bang or something like that, or what's going on, man, what's happening? La, 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 la.
One of the bullets knocked him clean off his feet. And get this, he says a voice in his head told him to play dead. So he did. He lay there, pretending, while the guy looked at him, turned around and took off. Once the adrenaline faded, reality hit. Literally. He said the pain was no joke. Turns out, he got shot twice in the calf, once in the thigh, and then, super close to his private parts. Oh, and one bullet decided to hang out in his body for over a decade. Yep, you heard that right. That little souvenir stayed under his skin for 13 to 14 years. It didn't even leave his body until he was in prison. The craziest part? It just popped out on its own. He said it slowly worked its way to the surface over time. No blood or anything, because scar tissue had already formed. Like, his body just handled it. And yes, he kept the bullet. He still has it. When asked how it felt when the bullet finally came out, he said he was relieved, even joked about hiding it since he was locked up at the time. Back to the shooting. After it happened, someone else called 911. He went to the hospital, got patched up, and they let him go the same day. The doctor said he was ridiculously lucky. One of the bullets almost hit his most important equipment, if you catch the drift. When it comes to dealing with the aftermath, DeAndre admitted that he might have PTSD, but not just from that day. He's been through a lot, and it all stacks up.
When I pulled up and he was attacking me and I'm trying to defend myself, I couldn't get him, you know what I mean? So I ran in the house and I grabbed a knife. When I came back out, he came at me again.
In 2001, just 2 weeks away from filming a new movie alongside Denzel Washington, a rising star in Hollywood was riding high on excitement and anticipation. He had recently been cast in a film directed by Fuqua, marking a pivotal moment in his budding career. Amidst this career breakthrough, he made a routine visit to his aunt's house, as he often did, to check on his family and offer financial support. But this visit took an unexpected and tragic turn. His aunt's boyfriend, seemingly agitated and dealing with personal struggles, confronted him as he arrived. Loud music playing from the visitor's car appeared to trigger the man, who lashed out without warning, escalating the situation into a physical altercation. The actor tried to defend himself, but his efforts to subdue the attack were in vain. In the chaos, he ran inside the house and grabbed a knife in desperation. When he returned outside, the confrontation continued. The boyfriend charged at him again, and as the man swung, the actor, in self-defense, struck back with the knife. Neither of them realized the severity of the injury at first, but soon blood appeared on the man's chest. Staggering and disoriented, the boyfriend collapsed.
He sat down, I told somebody to grab the water hose. I tried to run water on him and call the ambulance.
Despite the violence of the moment, the actor's immediate instinct was to help. He called for water, tried to comfort the wounded man, and stayed by his side, pleading for him to hold on until emergency services arrived. Tragically, the boyfriend died in his arms. The police arrived shortly after, arresting the actor at the scene. Shaken and in shock, he was charged with first-degree premeditated murder, a charge based on the claim that retrieving the knife constituted intent. Over the next year, the actor remained in jail, unable to post the $1 million bail set by the court. During his trial, he rejected a plea deal for 12 years, opting instead to fight for a fair judgment. His defense presented testimony from community members, including neighbors, pastors, and even the director of a film he had worked on. They all vouched for his character and his lack of intent to kill. Ultimately, the jury found him guilty of manslaughter, acknowledging that the death was unintentional, but holding him accountable for the consequences of his actions.
I mean, when I was in the police station, the first thing they told me, you're not gonna do forever. That's what they told me. He said, you're gonna do some time. I was like, man, well, you know, it is what it is.
The judge, however, dismissed the jury's recommendation for a lighter sentence and handed down the maximum penalty, which exceeded what the jury could have imposed.
Somebody dope fiend, you know, they were smart, and he got at me in the most intelligent way you could, because if I would have knew he was coming, he would have never broke my jaw, I can guarantee you that.
Prison was the darkest chapter of his life. Imagine being ripped away from your family, your dreams, and everything you worked for. One day, he was set to star in a movie with Denzel freaking Washington, and the next, locked up. Prison wasn't just isolating, it was dangerous. The raw aggression in there was off the charts. Fights, stabbings, and things he never thought he'd witness, all happening in front of his eyes. And yeah, there's a lot of Hollywood-level exaggeration about certain stuff, but the violence, that's as real as it gets. One time, he even got his jaw broken, and not in some dramatic showdown. It was a sneaky move from someone who knew exactly how to catch him off guard. If I'd seen it coming, no way that would have happened, he admitted. But that's just how it was. Constant chaos, no way to let your guard down. At first, DeAndre was angry and bitter, trapped in a system that felt like it was built to break him down. And yeah, he believed it for a while. Prison wasn't making anyone better, it was just throwing people in a cage and hoping they'd disappear. but something shifted. He stopped seeing himself as a victim and started digging deep, figuring out who he really was. He turned inward, stopped wasting time blaming the world, and started searching for his purpose. He didn't latch on to any specific label or faith. He just became him. Still, he couldn't ignore the heartbreaking reality around him. So many people inside had untapped potential, strong, smart, and sharp, with ideas that could have changed their communities. And yet, the system seemed determined to keep them locked away, keeping all that brilliance out of sight. Looking back, DeAndre reflects on what could have been. "I was right there, about to level up," he said, thinking about how his life was on the verge of something huge. But even now, with all he's been through, there's a glimmer of hope, because he's still here, still standing, and his story's far from over. Stepping back into the world after a decade away, let's just say the culture shock hit hard. Picture this. You walk out of a time capsule and suddenly everyone's glued to their phones, texting, bumping into each other, and not even looking up. He talked about how different the pace was inside. Slower, more intentional, seeing people in such a rush, practically crashing into each other without a second thought, left him feeling like he'd landed on another planet. Then, there's the adjustment phase. After a decade away, relearning how to navigate trust and social spaces wasn't exactly a walk in the park. DeAndre is all about respect, so his careful, cautious approach is just part of who he is, and maybe a little leftover from his time inside. When it came to getting back into Hollywood, the transition was surprisingly quick. He snagged his first gig with Rizzoli and Isles right out the gate, then landed roles in films like Gangster Squad with Ryan Gosling and Sean Penn. Hollywood? Yep, they welcomed him back. He reflected on working with Lloyd Avery II, the actor who famously played the guy who took out Ricky in Boys in the Hood. They worked together on Lockdown, and DeAndre described Avery as a solid guy, cool, grounded, and a standout presence. Fast forward, DeAndre was stacking credits again. He joined the indie film Dope, where his character gave a nod to Stacy from The Wood, but this time with some life upgrades. The movie carried a feel-good message and had a strong creative team, including executive producer Pharrell Williams. Another standout project? Imperial Dreams, where he worked alongside John Boyega, pre-Star Wars. DeAndre had nothing but praise for Boyega's talent, calling him someone to watch. The conversation even touched on the rise of British actors in Hollywood, names like Idris Elba and, of course, Boyega himself, and how they're killing it in the American film scene. As for Bonds, he's still here, working, adapting, and proving he's got what it takes to stay in the game, no matter how much the world around him changes.